what is socially acceptable, not what is probably morally right. And I believe that all of your parents talk to you about some similar things like treat people with respect, do the right thing whenever you go out in public. Self-discipline is what you do when people are not looking. Have the strength that whenever you see something wrong or hear something wrong, have the courage to say something about it. But let me just tell you, it's easier said than done, because a lot of times we don't make those choices whenever we are by ourselves and when nobody else is looking. And that peer pressure is very difficult whenever you're around other people, especially your friends, and you see them do things that they shouldn't be doing, things that kind of touch you in your chest and kind of go against your moral values, but you don't say anything about it because they're your friends. And so what I'm here to tell you tonight is this is what it takes. Sometimes you've heard people say jokes about Black people or Latino people, and sometimes you may have even heard Black people say jokes about white people that didn't kind of sit well with you, kind of rub you the wrong way. But maybe you didn't know how to say it to let that person know that I'm uncomfortable with this. This is where it kind of starts, because as kids, we eventually grow up to become adults. And I used to tell kids in school, school is a place where you learn skills that's going to take care of you for the rest of your life. And this is it. But at the same time, not only must you have the will, you must also have the courage to say something whenever you see something's not wrong, and stand up whenever against injustice all around the place and wherever it may raise its head. Now, let me talk to you about a few things, because that stems into what we call leadership, whether or not you're going to be a leader or a follower. And that is an important piece. And that being a leader, it takes you in a whole different place. Sometimes you got to step out of the realm of being a follower and lead people down a path that sometimes may be uncomfortable, but it's the right thing to do. So one person doing the right thing and going a positive direction is far more valuable and greater than a million people going the negative direction that's going to lead to your own demise. But that takes a lot of leadership, and it takes a lot of courage to do that. And sometimes it may force you to kind of change and think about your own thinking. But I tell people all the time, you can either change with change or be consumed by change. But the only people who like change are babies. But sometimes we just have to do it. Students, let me talk to you about one of the uncomfortable subjects, the whole issue around race. Whenever people start talking about race and religion, people start to get very uncomfortable. But I can tell you, no problem that you have, all problems that you face can't be solved, but no problem can be solved until you face it. So you have to have those uncomfortable conversations in order to move forward. And also it promotes healing, but you have to do it. Because in our world today, if you watch TV and you've been around more than 10 to 20 minutes, you have seen a lot of things that make you feel very uncomfortable. Take, for example, students, some of you may have heard about what we call the school to prison pipeline. Starting off in high school with what we call suspensions. How many of you have actually seen where you see a Black kid do the same thing that a white kid did, and the white kid gets sort of a slap on the wrist, but the Black person ends up getting a 3-day suspension? Some of you have seen that. And some of you may have gone and said something to your parents about it because it just didn't feel right in your chest. It made you feel uncomfortable, but you didn't know how to express it. And you didn't know how to go about saying something because you didn't want to get in trouble yourself. But this is how it starts. And then the next thing you know, whenever you leave school, you find situations where you see there are more African Americans that are in prison than whites for doing the same crime. So those are things right there that as adults, you're not going to be students forever. At some point, you're going to have to take your own place in the world and start addressing some of these issues, because it may not be you that is happening to, but at some point it could be you. And the thing about it is, you want to make sure that you're able to find firm footing, and that you be able to find your voice to address these particular issues. I've seen many people talk about, and heard many people talk about, police brutality. I think most of you probably seen the video with George Floyd. You've seen the video with Jacob Blake, George Floyd in Minnesota, and Jacob Blake right up the road in Kenosha. I'm sure that you've had plenty backdoor conversations and upfront conversations at home about what that looks like. Well, did the police have to shoot him 7 times? Well, did he do this or did he do that? Students, you have to think about your own thinking, because there are some times where in life you will see things, and sometimes people will try to make you and convince you that you didn't see what you saw with your very own eyes. And so you have to find it within yourself, and what I say, reconcile what you're feeling in your heart with your mind and what you saw with your very own eyes. And then you have to make a decision that whether or not you are comfortable with that. And if you're not comfortable with it, how do you find your voice to say something about it in a positive way? And how do you mobilize and lead other people in a way that they will follow you and assist you and get your voice across? The last thing I want to talk to you about, students, and then we're going to open it. I'm going to pass the torch to Dr. Kwaku. And I hope that you all are writing down some good questions. But I want to talk to you about this whole thing about standing and kneeling for the flag. Let me just tell you this here. Ever since Colin Kaepernick took a knee for the flag, that had just put a dividing line between people all over the nation, especially in the sports world. I've heard it in schools all around the place. And they say, well, if you don't stand for the flag, if you don't salute the flag, then you don't need to be living in America. Let me just tell you, I've been in the military for 29 years. I received the Bronze Star, received the Purple Heart. Let me just share with you, I'm a person who has stood and saluted the flag for as long as I can remember. But I will be the first person to stand up against injustice wherever it raises its head. I want you to remember that the very same people who fought and died for this country, they fought to give everyone the right to make that decision. And I can tell you this as well. If the same person who says, I really salute that flag and I thank all those soldiers who fought and died for this country, those are the same people that I want to see assisting those homeless veterans who are laying out on the street, the same people who are assisting in fighting for healthcare and making sure that those veterans, those same veterans that they fought and died and saluted the flag, get the services and mental health services that they so very need. Because one thing about it, you see them just like I see them. And a lot of times we walk right on by them, just like they're nobody. But in this world, I want you to know that everybody is a somebody. And the basis of social justice, it starts with you and the decisions that you are going to make whenever you see things in your school, at home, and within this society that starts with our people and making a decision and choice to make a difference. So it starts right there with the person you see every day in the mirror, and that is you. Thank you.
Brother Dr. Williams, man, I'm writing notes while you talking, so I'm excited. I'm excited to be able to speak on this, Joe. I thank you for allowing me to be able to come and talk. I told Joel I wasn't born in Beloit, but my family was born in Beloit, so I spent every one of my summers down there, right across the street from the lagoon, going to Tilly's. So, in fact, I think I'm gonna come down to Beloit just to get a Tilly's. It's got me thinking about that now, with that in my mouth. But no, I just like to say to everybody, thank you for coming out. For you to be on this phone call at this time, let me know that you are a leader, and that's what Dr. Williams was talking about. And to be a leader, that's a great title, but it also comes with a heavy dose of responsibility. Now I'm looking on my screen and I'm looking at like a lot of names. You know, I don't see faces. I want to thank Brooke. I want to thank Miss Osaki. I want to thank Amber, Isabella, Libby, Meredith, because I can see your faces, so I can see some motion. If there's a reason why you can't do your screen, then don't do it. But if you can, let me see your face. Let me see your action. And I tell you this as it relates to being a professional going forward. People want to see your face. They want to know what you're doing, because so many times we can multitask, but being a speaker, you thrive off of energy. And when you just see names, you almost feel like you're talking to yourself, like you're talking to a wall. So everybody that's flashing on, I appreciate you. I thank you. But also what I'm gonna do, I'm not just gonna be sitting up here talking. I'm gonna make sure that you're interactive. So get your fingers ready. What I want you to do is I want you to go in your chat section right now. And we're gonna open this up for questions, but this is something just to get you involved. I want you to give me one word of how you all are feeling right now. Just write down how you're feeling literally. Like, what's your emotions? What's going on? How are you feeling? Because I know this is a heavy topic. It's not easy, but I want to know where everybody is at, especially in this age of COVID, where everything is taken away from us in so many different ways. We got to make so many different accommodations. I want to know, how are you feeling right now? So kind of shoot those out. All right, I love that. Intrigued. That's good, because we're going to talk about some things. I'm inspired, motivated. After listening to Dr. Williams, I would feel that way too. Curious, ready to learn. Motivated. Oh, okay, y'all hyping me up. I'm telling you, by the end of this, I'm gonna be sweating, because I'm about to give you everything that I got. So I need that same thing from you. Hopeful, and that's good, because you know what? You gotta feel hopeful, because we're still living. So we have to live in a land of optimism. There's so many negative things that we see in the world that can bring our spirits down. But what we have to do is look and see, hey, how can I be that change? How can I be that spark? And when you start to think about this, now this is what I want you to think about in life is this. There's an old saying that comes from Greek philosophy. It says the unexamined life is a life that's not a life worth living. So when you think about that, I want you to think about, what are you doing as it relates to legacy? Yes, I know you're young, but I want you thinking about, when you are dead, what will the people say about you? What would your presence have meant to this world? And don't think because you are young that you can't start to think about that, because really, if you look through the annals of time, you will see that it's the young people who have always moved the needle for the world. It's never the old people like myself. It's the people who are your age, who are willing to do the unthinkable, to go out and to do things that people thought can't be done. Because once people get older, they get comfortable in their lifestyle. They start to think a little bit too much. But the beauty about being young is there's a level of invincibility. It's a level of hopefulness, what you talked about, being determined, being motivated, wanting to be helpful. These are the things that we need from you all to really help inspire the older people to be able to move the needle. So when we talk about these things, you say, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to do my legacy? How am I going to be a leader? I'm going to say a name, and I just want you to type yes or no if you know who that person is. The first name is George Hill. Just write yes or no. And if you know, you can even, for a bonus, write yes and where you know that name from. And I see we have a winner. Sounds familiar. George Hill is actually a member of the Milwaukee Bucks. But if you remember, he was the one, along with Sterling Brown, who spoke out when the Milwaukee Bucks were ready to boycott the entire season. It ended up just being a few games, but he was one of the people who said, you know what? I'm going to speak out. I'm going to say something about the injustice. As Dr. Williams talked about, the Bucks had to be somebody to say something, because the injustices that have been happening, whether it was with Breonna Taylor, whether it was with George Floyd, or all of the ones from the past, when Jacob Blake happened right in the backyard, they said we have to speak up because we have a podium, we have an audience. So when we talk about leadership, leadership is about being bold. It's about sacrificial. It's about, you know what might I be willing even to lose in order to make a bigger gain? So when we think about that, I'm going to say another name, Naomi Osaka. If you know who that is, write down yes or no. And if you know yes, then write down where you know her from. Jake put a big yes. Joel said yes, a tennis player. Naomi Osaka just won the U.S. Open, and she had to win 7 matches to get to the U.S. Open, to get to the championship. And at each match, she wore a mask with the name of somebody who had been brutalized by the police. So when we start to look about how can we boycott, how can we protest, the Bucks were willing to give up their season. Naomi said, you know what, I'm not going to stop playing tennis. What I'm going to do is, by my domination on this court and winning, is bring attention, because every time I win, I get to do another name. And every time I get interviewed, I get to say something. So what she did was she learned how to be a revolutionary in her own mind. So many times when we talk about how can I lead, how can I be a leader, how can I do something, we think of other leaders that we know. And sometimes we think we have to do exactly what they did. And you don't. What you have to do is what Dr. Williams talked about. What's in your heart? What makes you feel comfortable? What makes you feel safe? You do what feels comfortable for you. We're all blessed with different gifts. So what I want you to do is use the gift that you have, and then to be able to express yourself in that way. I'm going to give you an easy one, because I want everybody to get a yes where they know. Have you ever heard of Colin Kaepernick? I see some of the faces smiling already, everybody going on. Colin Kaepernick was what? He was a player from the NFL. And what did he do? He took a knee. And when he did it, he was ostracized to the point where we say that sacrificial. Sometimes to give up being a leader, it means you have to give up something. He gave up his career because it literally took him out the league. But what's ironic was after George Floyd, you saw everybody around the NBA take a knee. You saw everybody in the NFL willing to take a knee. Even if you look at the games they have on the end zones, end racism. The commissioner of the NFL, Roger Goodell, said, you know what? We made a mistake. We didn't listen to Colin Kaepernick when we should have, because the narrative of what he was saying was hijacked, so we took it to a different level. And what I want you to know is this: Colin Kaepernick sacrificed his career. And even though he sacrificed his career and financial dollars, he won it all on the back end, because he got a beautiful deal with Nike that allowed him to have the money. Did he get to play the sport he loved? Absolutely not. So he still lost that. But what he did was he won something bigger, because he brought a movement. And when you are a leader, what you got to know is this: when I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, it might not feel good, and I might not get applause, and I might not get the hoorays, but history will prove you right. And if you look at the title that was written by Dr. Darrell Williams, it's called Social Justice and You. Will you be on the right side of history? So when you look at these revolutionary names that we talk about, you start to say, how can I be in my own right? I don't have to be Colin Kaepernick. I don't have to be George Hill. But how can I do something in my own way that allows me to feel comfortable, that allows me to say, I'm doing this, and guess what? I'll deal with anything else that comes from with it. I got 2 more names, and then we're going to be done with this part right here. Have you ever heard of a man named Muhammad Ali? So I see a lot of yeses right away. Muhammad Ali, while he was at the height, a lot of people said Colin Kaepernick was at the end of his career. He wasn't starting anymore, and so he could be a little bit more bold. He was actually doing it as a plea to let people know. Well, when Muhammad Ali took his stand not to fight in the Vietnam War, he was a heavyweight champion of the world. And he didn't go because he wanted to be a draft dodger. He didn't go because he said, I'm a conscientious objector. I'm not going over there to kill these people. I don't believe in war. That's not a part of who I am. Well, he got his title taken away. And not only did he get his title taken away, they took away his passport, because he was the champion of the world. They said, we won't allow you to make money in Germany. We won't allow you to make money in France or in Italy or in any other place across the world, because you wouldn't fight for America. We want to do this. And not only did they take away his title, they threatened to put him in jail. And if it wasn't for the Supreme Court to uphold and overturn that ruling, he would have went. And so I want you to think about what he was willing to give up. The last name I'm going to give you is this. And if anybody can get this, Joe Beard will give you $50. Look, we're going. No cheating on the internet. You got 10 seconds to put in where you know him from. Who is Peter Norman? Do you know who Peter Norman is? And you can write down, no. I want you to stay active. Don't just get there. This was a hard one. And I didn't know who Peter Norman was for a long time, even though I saw him my whole life. In the 1968 Olympics is where things that got really heated from a political and a racial standpoint. Have you ever seen a poster in Olympics where it's two black men and they're standing with their hand raised with black gloves? You know that picture? Well, Peter Norman is the white man that took second place. He's actually Australian. And what people don't know is that he participated in that same boycott. But instead of raising his hand, he just stood still, but he wore a pin that talked about peace. But because people knew that he did what he did, the people in Australia, now he just came in second place. He wasn't even predicted to place. He ran the race of his life. He came in second place and brought honor to Australia. But when he came back, they disowned him. His wife left him. And they said, listen, if you want to participate in the next Olympics, if you want to be included in our society, all you have to do is apologize for what you did and said you shouldn't have been a part of that whole presentation. He said, I won't do it. And Peter lived a very difficult life the rest of his life, ostracized in his native land where he should have been a hero. Even when the Olympics came to Australia later in life, they still couldn't reconcile with him and let him be a part of that celebration. So when I talk about sacrifice, sometimes it could be a sacrifice like Martin Luther King or like Gandhi, where you had to give your life. Sometimes it could be like Muhammad Ali, where it's your career and it's money. Sometimes it could be like Colin Kaepernick and Peter Norman, where it's your reputation. But what I want you to know is this: if you are a leader, your walk has to match your talk. And when people start to look at you, they follow you and they look and see how unbreakable you are, how unbendable you are. The reason why Peter Norman, the reason why Muhammad Ali is enshrined in history is because they took a stand. It hurt them, but guess what happened? They didn't budge. But it doesn't always end like that, because remember Naomi Osaka, who I was just talking about? She won the U.S. Open and walked away with a large check and still got to do what she did. But the thing is, we don't know what we're going to do when we're sacrificing as a leader. There's an Irish poet named William Butler Yeats, and he says it takes more courage for a person to look into the dark corners of their own soul than it takes for a soldier to fight on the battlefield of war. One of the reasons why I have so much respect for Dr. Williams is not just because of what he's doing now with the governing emergency system, because he literally took his life, put his life on the line for us, not in one, but in two tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. And when I see a person who's willing to put their life on the line, that's a person who I'll listen to. That's a person who I follow, because they're letting their walk match their talk. So oftentimes leaders will talk a talk, but they won't match it with their walk. They'll bend when it comes time to be convenient. If you're going to be that, you have to stand on your morals. But like William Butler Yeats, we have to be willing to look inside of ourselves. And so that has to come with a level of self-love. We have to love ourselves, but in our self-love, we also have to be self-critical. Meaning I will criticize myself. I will look at myself for the hypocrisies. I will look at myself for the weaknesses, for the challenges that I must overcome. Because if I'm going to be a great leader, every day I have to get better. And this is the beauty about being a great leader and getting better. I'm not in competition with Joel. I'll never be a Joel Beard. I'll never be a Dr. Williams. But you know what I can be? I can be the best Dr. Kwaku Smith that I can be. And the only person who I'm trying to battle against, the only person who's my competition is who I was yesterday. So my goal is to be better today than I was yesterday. And tomorrow I'm looking at how can the Kwaku of tomorrow be better than the Kwaku of today. So when you start to think about these things, I want you to think about all of these things that we have to have. We talk about having a moral courage, doing right in the face of wrong when it's so easy to do wrong and everybody else is doing it. And it might be consequences for us doing right. I want you to think about, how do I educate myself? Because there's nothing worse than a leader who doesn't get all of the information and the evidence. So in order to be a leader, there's a level of study, there's a level of preparation that comes with it. And I tell you this, and I want you to listen very well. If I ask you, are you a leader or a follower, what would you type? And type it now. Are you a leader or a follower? Go ahead. You got 20 seconds. Because if you got to think about it, it's okay. But are you a leader? Are you a follower? Now, if you look at mine, I wrote, I'm a follower and a leader. You know why? Because you don't know how to lead all the time. You need to be taught. Now, it can be built in you to do, but you have to be able to learn. And when now you're learning, so to be a great follower is this though. Now I love, Grace, you put both. When you are a great follower, you start to look at the leaders who are above you and say, what are they doing that's good? What can I emulate? As a soldier, you don't come in as a captain. You come in as a private. And through your ranks, you grow up and you show your mettle. You show the ability to lead. But to be a good follower, to be a good leader, you got to know who to follow. If you follow somebody who is amoral, you follow somebody who is not intelligent, you follow somebody who does not know what to do, that's how your leadership qualities will do. But if you follow the right person, oh, great things can happen. And you say, well, only got bad leaders in front of me. Well, guess what? They've been great examples because now you know exactly what not to do. So there's an example in everything that you do. So when you start looking at it, I want you to look at every ism that we talk about. Today, we're talking clearly about race and what's going on with racism. But in the world of isms, Dr. Williams alluded to it. You got religion, you got gender, you got sexual orientation, you got able-bodied, you got elderly, you got ageism. There's so many different isms. Martin Luther King said, guess what? Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So if we look upon all of those isms, we're going to find ourselves in a place where we can be otherized, where we can be marginalized in some sense. So when I see injustice anywhere, it's incumbent upon me not to be hypocritical and say, I'm going to fight for them just like I would fight for me. Because once people see that they can take advantage of one group, now what they want to do is see how we can slowly get that to other groups. While people thinking they're safe over here, the other greedy people are trying to see how they can consume everything. So when you are a leader, you got to recognize there's a responsibility that comes with it. Because if you don't do it, it may not get done. And when you recognize a leader, it's so beautiful because once a leader comes, then the masses come behind you. No one person can do anything, but it's the person who can be magnetic and charismatic and bring the masses with them that allows them to now say, you know what, we can do things in numbers. That's why I say a leader is educated. They've thought about the different things that they need to do. They've counted the cost. They've done their due diligence to say, when is the time to fight? When is the time not to fight? When is the time to speak? When is the time not to speak? Colin Kaepernick, as much as I love him, the reason why he wasn't able to succeed in the beginning is because he took a stand, but he took it by himself. And they were able to make an example out of him of why not to do this. But if you look at the Milwaukee Bucks, they came together as a team. And it's a lot harder to attack a team than it is one person. And so when you start thinking about your leadership, you start thinking about who are my other leaders that's along with me? Who are the other people in the group that can help us move the needle? Have we really investigated everything to make sure this is what we want to do and investigate in our time? And when you see a wrong, have the courage to go about and do something, no matter what it may cost in your sacrifice. Now, what I want to do is leave more than enough time for us to answer questions and do everything like this. So I'll slow down. I'll turn it over to Joel to see how we want to kind of do a question and answer. But as leaders, there's everybody. Dr. Williams said, I hope you're taking notes and I hope you're writing questions because as leaders, everybody should have at least one question that you want to know. I heard people saying in the beginning they were motivated, they wanted to learn, they wanted to get some things, they were curious. Well, this is your time now where you have people before you, not just for today, we can talk even afterwards, but specifically right now in this time and space where we can go over things. And I'll say this before I pass it to Joe. If all you do is think about what we just said in this hour, in this time that we have, you haven't maximized what we've done. Your job is to go out and to think about those names, think about the things that we said and say, how can I really incorporate this in my life? How can I really let these things where they're embodied into who I am so I don't have to think about it, they come out natural. But that only comes, what we say, by education, studying these names, we said, seeing what else you can learn to grow, how you can help in the lane in which you feel comfortable. So Joel, I'll turn it over to you so we can start with a Q&A.
All right, man, thank you. Thank you, both of you. That's good stuff. We don't have too many questions in the chat right now. If you have a question, well, go ahead and throw your name in there and then you can go ahead and unmute and ask your question. Go ahead, Libby.
So my question was, how do you two feel about reparations? And have your minds changed on that over the course of your life? And if so, what triggered that change in your mindset?
Libby, thank you so much for that question. Yeah, I totally believe in the reparations. I mean, because the thing about it is you have to look back from a historical perspective and think about all the years, the many years that has that resources were taken even from Africa on up to now, and the opportunities, whether it's housing, education, economics, and you see how it manifests itself today inside of many of our neighborhoods, especially inside of our larger urban cities. So it's easy for people to say that no, it's those people over there and they living like this because they want to live like that. But it's more difficult for them to reflect back and to realize how it came to be, and the 400 years plus of economic discourse that has plagued a whole race of people, and to turn that around. So it takes resources, it takes those money, it takes a better education system, it takes all of us looking at it and investing within that within a group of people to help reverse what has happened over many years. And a lot of times people look at it and say, well, I'm not going to help those people over there because that's taking away money out of my pocket. But what you have to realize is that whenever you help somebody in a situation that's not as good as yours, it really uplifts everybody, not just that individual.
Okay, Nana, you want to? Did I
Yeah,
say that right?
Yep, you pronounced it correctly.
Perfect.
I was wondering like what the best way to bring like acts of injustice up to like faculty and staff, especially when the majority of the faculty like I have at West are all like white. Like what do you think like the best way to like approach teachers about that? If I like see anything going on, like what is the best way to do that?
I know Dr. Williams just answered the last question, but I'm gonna defer to you because you were in the schools, and then I can maybe piggyback, but I would love for you to answer this being in the school system.
I think the best thing for you to do is really realize who you are, and I want you to think about what Dr. Kwaku just said about coming as a team. So it can take one person as a leader to have an idea, but if you get a lot of other people with you, you create a movement. And it's more difficult for that teacher or anybody or that administrator to say, no, we don't want to hear these many voices. It's easy for them to say, I don't want to hear this one. But I think it's also that you have a clear plan on what you want to do with some with some goals, and how it's going to not only help that organization, but how that organization is going to help people within the school and the benefits, and also within the community. When I was at Pulaski High School, we started a group called the Youth Leadership Initiative. And in Beloit, some of you may have heard of LULAC, the League of United Latin American Citizens. That was, no one had heard of that in Beloit. And here it is, this Black guy coming up there as a superintendent of schools talking about he's going to start a LULAC chapter. And we did it. And what I did was went and met with Latino students. And we started that movement. And then I just happened to be the superintendent there at the time, but we had to convince the staff. And so we started meeting with the staff and talking about having goals and objectives and getting the staff more involved. And next thing you know, we had over 100 students in less than 6 months that were a part of the LULAC chapter within the school, and also started 2 LULAC chapters for our parents within the community. So now you got a student that had an idea. The student went and talked to other students and created a movement. Now all of a sudden you talk with the administrators and the staff within the school, got them on board. And in addition to that, now you got the parents that's then impacted their community. And so you had the winning hand right there. It all started with one idea. But think about what he said. If you just go as one person, somebody could easily shoot your spirit down. And I'm gonna say it like this right here. You know, I have a daughter, And I know it's just like a kid at home and kids love to sing and they sing all the time. But if one person walk up to that kid and say, shut your mouth, you know you can't sing. You all of a sudden you'll start to hear that kid won't sing anymore for a long time. You're like, why you stop singing? Well, what you call it said, I can't sing. So don't put yourself in that situation. Have that voice, and whenever, if you really believe in it, if you have that drive, you know, a simple no, that just means take it to the next level.
Hey, that's great. I can't say anything from that. But Joel, if I can, I want to just rewind for a little bit and go back to Libby's question from the reparations. And she said, do you think that it is deserved? And so my absolute question is yes. When I was younger, to answer your question, I thought it should just be money, though. And what I didn't recognize is in reparations, it should be so many different things. If you look at the end of World War II, after there was mass destruction in Europe, specifically in Japan and Germany, you look at what the U.S. did with the Marshall Plan and how they helped to strategically rebuild these places that were just like demolished by the war. When you look inside of any place in American culture, any group that has been marginalized, otherwise have been in some way exterminated, have been repaid in reparations. Whether you look at the First Nation, you look at those descendants of the Japanese internment, and also even if you go back just from the experiment that was done in Tuskegee with the Tuskegee experiment. So for those individuals who are still alive, they receive reparations not only in the form of money, but also as it relates specifically to healthcare. So when we look at reparations, I don't believe America could ever truly pay reparations for what they did through the ideal of slavery. You look at something like Breonna Taylor, who was killed in her home, and she was awarded a jury, one of the largest settlement of $12 million. Now we say slavery, but that's really a whitewashed term. Really what slavery was criminal behavior. It was theft and slavery, theft of a people. It was murdering of a people. It was rape of a people. It was absolute torture of a people. It was kidnapping of a people. And so you said if you put that in economic terms, and specifically if you put that with interest rate, it would absolutely bankrupt America to try to do that. And that's not going to happen. But so what can happen, what legitimately can happen, is not just the 40 acres and a mule in which people would, speak about so much, which I still think would have been not nearly enough to cause the damage that was done. But when you look at something like a Marshall Plan, where you say, hey, you know what? And also what's been done for our indigenous brothers and sisters, where literally land is given, land grants was given, sort of like what a lot of our brothers and sisters that come over as immigrants, so many different loans, so many different ways of economic recovery, economic stimulation has come. I think if that's done, that helps. And to Brother Dr. Williams' point, when you help the least of society, you help all of society. I don't know how many of you all have watched the movie Hidden Figures. It was about some ladies of African-American descent that worked at NASA. And they weren't given really a fair opportunity. But once they were given a fair opportunity, we saw how beautiful and how brilliant they were. And you just look and say, what if these brilliant minds would have been given full access from the beginning? So if America is going to fully be great, it's not just reparations for those African descendants of slavery, but it's really about how do we create an economic system that's fair for all, that really allows everybody to really be able to maximize their potential. And I think when we do that, that's when America can become the place that she was intended to be. Although the founding fathers missed the mark with their walk, they really hit the mark with their talk. Because what America is intended to be is the most beautiful place in the world. Unfortunately, we just not lived up to that. But I believe reparations is a step in the right direction to be able to give that economic recovery and stimulus to help uplift the people who have been perpetually put in as an underclass. And when you do that, you create a better society because you help get the best of people and not the worst of people. I'll turn it back over to you, Joe.
All right, thank you. We have a question from Anna. Do you guys have any advice on how I should start this conversation among my sports team?
Okay, I see you, Dr. Williams. I got you. Yeah, you know what? It's a couple of ways in which you can do this when you talk about your team. One, as a coach, is like being a parent. You have to know your team like you know your children. And so by knowing them, you say, which way can I go? So you say, do I have to do like you talk about when you start college? There's classes called like 101. So if you take Psychology 101, it's the very, very basic. Me and Dr. Williams actually got our doctorates at the same time. And I remember we were in a class called 901. And that was like the highest level of education because of what they required from us. So as a coach, you have to ask yourself, are my people at a level of 101 or 901? And based on what they are, I have to do that, but I have to do it based on probably the members of my team who are at the lowest level to make sure everybody gets something. So what can you do? One of the things I love to do is to show a movie, something like Remember the Titans or something like Glory Road. One of these movies that allow people to see the struggle and to understand certain things that we don't know. So many times we get mad at people for not understanding certain things, but it's not that they don't know because they don't care. It's just sometimes it's really a true level of ignorance, and ignorance not meaning a derogatory terms, but literally it means I've never been taught, I don't understand. So what I do as a coach is I ask questions. What do you know? What do you think? And I have these questions out on a one-on-one basis before I bring them to the team. But the main thing and this is me as a former coach speaking, what I know is I need my team to be one. Where I do contract work at the University of Wisconsin, what we talk about is the concept of one team. And one team means we're all one. You're only as strong as your weakest link. So if one person is hurt, we all are hurt. So what I do is I come in and I get that concept that we are one team. Our goal is not only to win the championship, but it's to win the championship of life. How can we be the best people? So not only do we make you a better athlete while you're here, we talk about how these lessons that we learn on the playing field can then transfer into real life, whether it's in the classroom or whether it's when you go off to college or you go off into the professional workplace setting. So you say, as a coach, how do I bring this up? I literally just talk to everybody about it, see what they're feeling. So oftentimes students won't share anything because sort of like Nana said, it's like, you say, well, if I say something, they're just going to blow it away. You know, they're not going to say anything about it, and they'll belittle me or they'll make it seem like it's nothing, like I'm overreacting. But coaches, when you ask a question and they give you an answer, not only do you have to hear, but you have to act upon it, or then your voice will become deaf to them. They won't believe in what you say. And then what we have to do is get out rules. And the only rule I ever have as a coach is respect. Because if there's respect within myself, respect what I do for other players, that makes all of the other rules null and void. That's the only thing I need. So we talk about how do we respect each other by our talk, by our actions? How do we respect each other by standing up for our brothers and sisters up on the playing field? How do I make sure that when we go somewhere that we represent our school, we represent our families to the highest of qualities? So when you say, well, how do I bring this up? We literally bring it up. And then based on the answers that they give you, you can start to talk about it. As you can see in my bookshelf here, I have a ton of books, but right here is my section specifically for my athletes. And it's a ton of things on how to become a team, how to become a champion, how to make sure that we're molded together. And one of my favorite books on what I talk about is this book right here called The Energy Bus. And it's a very easy read, It's written by John Gordon. And if you can see this, he talks in metaphors. And in this book, it talks about how do we become one? How do we make sure that the energy we bring is a positive nature? How do we make sure that everything that we're doing as a team makes us roll as one? But it also goes into self-introspection. Am I being a part of the problem or am I being part of the solution? And why I love something like this book or movies is because it gives us what we call a shared experience. And that shared experience is a reference that we all know and we can always relate and pull from. So when we think about those things, the biggest thing is just to one, bring up the question and listen when they do it, and then make sure we're all together on the same page.
Hey, I love that book, The Energy Bus. That's a great book. Elena, why don't you go ahead and unmute? Ask a question.
Thank you for speaking to us. I just had one question, which is, what would you say to teens who might be afraid to speak up about injustice?
Well, I would say to you, you have to find your voice, but also, if you have it in your head, I would like to believe that there's at least one or two people that you can trust and have that conversation with. And maybe, and I can tell you this right here, whenever you bring it up, you're going to find out that there are a lot of other people who kind of think like you. But even if they don't, think like you, at least you're in a safe enough place to actually have that conversation. But I can tell you this here also. The day you choose to be silent about things that really matter, that's really the day that you start to die. Because at the end of the day, some of the things, this is how I make my decision on whether or not I'm going to say something or not whenever I see it. Because at the end of the day, I have to sleep with me. So when I go home at night, I have to say to myself, am I comfortable hearing what I heard and not saying anything if it was wrong? Am I comfortable seeing what I saw and not saying anything about it? You heard Dr. Kwaku said, look, leadership, it's not all about you. Leadership is nothing about you. Leadership is about what you can do for other people. That's what it's about. And I'm going to tell you, leadership comes at a cost. Leadership costs. Dr. Kwaku, we might have to do a chapter on a book about that, the cost of leadership. Because I think a lot of times people, they're afraid to say something because of what it's going to cost them. At your age, maybe it's a look from a friend, or you don't want somebody thinking about you in such a way. And so then that hushes your voice. And the last thing that you want, let me say this, the most important thing that I've learned that kids want inside of a school is a voice. And the moment that that voice is hushed, that's where the problem lies. So find your voice and never let anyone take that voice, even if it comes at a cost. And I can tell you this right here, if you're doing the right thing, believe me, it'll come back to you full circle.
Hey, that's it. And I just want to give you 4 quick words, and I'm going to write them down in the chat. And Elena, this speaks exactly to what you said. I'm typing kind of fast, so excuse me for the misspellings and everything like that. And so there's an exercise that we do. I spell interrupt wrong. I put an I instead of a U. There's an exercise that we do that's called speak up, Elena. And so when you hear somebody say something that's wrong, to Dr. Williams' point, the first thing you should do is you look at that cue, and that's the word that's question. And so what you do is question them. It's very innocent. Like what did you say? What did you mean by that? Because we don't want to assume something. Maybe it's something within us that we're thinking they said something and they didn't. So we give them a chance to really explain themselves. But if we see somebody who says something that's clearly outrageous, what we want to do is interrupt them. I'm not going to let you say that in my presence. We're not going to do that. Now, when Dr. Williams said the cost of leadership, it's bold for you to be able to say that. So if somebody interrupts and you wanted to interrupt, but you didn't because you didn't have the courage, but they said something and you do, then what you want to do is echo what they just said. Because now it resonates. Not just one person said this, but multiple people have said this to me, like something is wrong. And when I hear from 2 sources, it's harder to kind of like denounce what they said. But after you've questioned, you've educated, you interrupted, you interrupted and echo. Now you have to educate and tell them why this is wrong, why this is not the right thing to say. I'll give you an example. And I had no idea what I was saying. It was just something I heard. And somebody would told me from a long time ago, I said, oh, you the low man on the totem pole. And somebody said, oh, no, we don't say that. And I said, like, what do you mean? But what it was brought to me that it was a great disrespect to my indigenous First Nation indigenous people, talking about the totem pole in that language in that manner, because it meant something completely different. Now, this was something that I was just using as a regular euphemism that it went on in our society. But in my ignorance, I didn't know that I was doing what we call a microaggression, an implicit bias. It was offending people without knowing I was offending. So what I had to do was humble myself and say, even though I didn't mean it in that direction, let me apologize for saying what I said, and then let me find another way to find another synonym, another analogy, another metaphor to be able to say my point so I don't offend anyone. You know why? Even though I didn't mean it as an insult, if they took it that way, I have to recognize what would I want if the situation was opposite. I would want somebody to give me that same level of respect. So when we talk about, Elena, to your point, what can you do when you hear something? Question them first. See what they're talking about. Interrupt them if it's so egregious. Echo it if somebody else is around, but then educate them, because that's what we want to do. We don't want to create enemies out of these different things. These are what we call learning opportunities. And through a learning opportunities is how we make an enemy a friend, how we move somebody from ignorant to informed and educated. I'll put it back to you, Brother Joel.
Thank you. That's awesome. Thank you. Do we have any other questions? We're coming up on an hour right now, so we're getting close to the end. We got any other questions?
Hey, Joel, while they coming up with a question, and I'll stop when I see the question come up in there. I just want to just go a little bit off what Dr. Kwaku just said. Because students, I want you to really kind of think about yourself and what you see whenever you go inside of your school. And a lot of times, people voices are hushed just simply by their surroundings because of the makeup of the schools. For example, in many of your, classrooms and groups that you may be a part of, I mean, in some cases, you may be the only white kid in the room. You might be the only black kid in the room. You might be the only Latinx student in the room or the only Asian in the room. So when those topics come up, the only time that you feel like somebody even looks at you for a response is when it's you the black kid in the room and it's the black topic. Or you the only Latinx kid in there and it's a Latinx subject. But when really you have a lot of white kids that be in that room, whenever something is uncomfortable, they may look at you to say something, but they really feel it in their spirit too. Because one thing that we know, that we saw with the George Floyd situation is something moved and touched people in such a way that when they saw that video, there are some people, black people looked at it and say, okay, now this is videotape, now that everybody can see it. But other people who saw it, they looked at it and they said, I don't care whether or not you really don't care much for black people or whatever the case may be, but you saw something that was wrong and you felt it in your chest like, this just don't feel right. This don't look right. And so that's why you see people from all around the world. I go to marches all around the state, but I see it all around the world. These are not just black people marching. This is a diverse group of people who are marching because they saw something that was wrong and they said something needs to change. Because at some point, God forbid, it could be you or somebody who you know. So we have to take advantage of this opportunity and reflect and take bold action where possible to make those changes so that this never happens again.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. I don't see any other questions, so I think we might be wrapping things up here. Again, I mean, I can't thank you enough for the words, the encouragement, the knowledge that you dropped on us today. That I know I learned something, you know, and I'm hoping everybody else on this call learned something that I can take moving forward. I can take talking to our coaches, to our teams, to our kids, and talking to my family, you know, to be honest with you. So I thank you both very much for
Hey, Joel, can I just say one last thing, and I'm gonna shut up for the night.
Okay.
I really want to say thank you to all of the students, the coaches, and I want to say just thank you for being you and thank you for what you do. I really appreciate your giving us this space, your time and attention just to listen. Hopefully you learned one thing. I remember I told you at the beginning, the only goal for me is for you to leave here saying, at least I can think about my own thinking. And so hopefully we've achieved that that one objective. I also want to thank Dr. Kwaku for being on this call. Students, I know you all just know us from right here, but I'm telling you, sometimes you got to shake people's hands while they still free. And Dr. Kwaku is one of those type guys. The guys that you talking to somebody that you're gonna. I hope y'all took a screenshot of this thing, but this guy's on CNN. This guy's all over the place, written many books. And at some point in time, you're gonna see him somewhere, and you're gonna say, "Oh, that's the guy that was on that thing." Your friend's gonna say, "Well, you don't know that guy. You wasn't on that call," and you can show him. But I mean, just a brilliant young man who's doing great things all throughout the community. And it's really a blessing and my honor to have known him for many, many, many years and continue to see him doing the great things that he's doing. But students, that said, you are the they that we talk about. The next generation belongs to you. So I shake your hand and I salute you for being on the call. Thank you.
Well, with that, I'm gonna just end it with that because that's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Oh yeah, that's awesome. I did record this meeting, so I will put it up and make it available to your athletic directors, and they can get it out to you. And we'll share this with our community. So the words will hopefully travel and will fall on some ears that are open. So thank you everyone for coming. Thank you to our speakers. Truly appreciate it. And I'm definitely going to be in touch with you here very soon. And everybody have a great night.
You all have a good night. Nobody told you today. We love you. We count on you. We wish the best for you as you go through this semester.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Smith. Everybody have a great night and take care. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was very insightful.
Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Thanks, guys.
More than welcome.